What's up, guys? My name's Stu, and today we are looking at the Isomagnetic Plasma what do they call these things again? Advanced Engineering Isomagnetic Plasma Distribution Manifold. You know, those new weapon power consoles. So the new advanced consoles in Star Trek Online have been a thing now for a little bit, and people still have a lot of questions about these, and I imagine one of the big ones is, what the heck is an advanced console? Advanced consoles are sort of a new type of console. They're exclusive to certain divisions and have certain restrictions that other consoles don't normally have. Currently, the consoles are split into 3 different categories: Advanced Tactical, Advanced Engineering, and Advanced Science. The unique thing about these is that you can only use one of those 3 categories, so if you are using Advanced Tactical consoles on your build, you cannot use any Advanced Engineering or Advanced Science consoles. So there's no mixing and matching. The creation of these consoles was basically Cryptic's attempt to fight off the supremacy of the Spire consoles. For years now, many weapons-based builds have been very reliant on these Spire consoles, the vulnerability locators and/or exploiters. So much so that a ship is largely judged based on how many of these consoles that you can fit onto it, so the less tactical consoles that a ship has, the less favorable it is with a lot of the fan base. So to combat this line of thinking, Cryptic has introduced these new advanced consoles to kinda give you other options. So the old Spire consoles, the vulnerability locators and exploiters, those are now advanced tactical consoles. Nothing's really changed about them. You can still get them at the Fleet Spire. You can actually re-engineer them now because all advanced consoles can be re-engineered. Not that I think you would want to. It's probably cheaper to just buy new ones. But yeah, you can now re-engineer them. And yeah, they are just now the new advanced tactical consoles, meaning you cannot mix them in with the new engineering and science advanced consoles. That's actually kind of a point in favor for the tactical consoles, in my opinion, because the advanced engineering and science consoles, the only way to get them is through the crafting system, and they require a unique new crafting component, and the only way to get those components is through certain elite level TFOs. You can see here the Stow Wiki has a full list of all these consoles and where to get the crafting components for them from each of the elite TFOs that they drop from. I'll link this page down below in the video description so you can pull this up for yourself. Completing any of these TFOs on Elite will have a 50-50 chance of dropping a specific crafting component for these new consoles. You will need 5 of these components to craft one of these consoles. For example, for the new weapon power consoles, you will need 5 of these Isomagnetic Plasma Piece Advanced Engineering Fragment components. Once you have 5 of those, you will be able to craft them into an Isomagnetic Plasma Toradol coil. I think that's how you pronounce that. But yeah, once you have this coil component, then you will be able to use that to craft one of the new isomagnetic consoles. So not only do you need 5 components just to craft one console, but the components themselves only have a 50-50 drop rate, so grinding for these things is going to be a bit of work, to say the least. And making the consoles themselves isn't even the final step, because then you gotta not only upgrade them, but you also need to re-engineer them. Re-engineering these advanced consoles is true RNG-induced pain because the obnoxious amount of modifiers they've put on here makes getting the one modifier that you actually want for your console extremely difficult to get. There are 24 different modifiers, so you have a 1 in 24 chance of getting the mod you want every time you re-engineer these things. So yeah, in order to get the modifier that you want, like say you're running a phaser build, so you're going to want the phaser damage modifier. Yeah, you're likely going to have to burn through a lot of dilithium and salvage in order to get that mod. And these new advanced consoles are supposed to compete with the Spire consoles, meaning you're gonna need more than one. The thing that really annoys me is that they basically just took all the modifiers that could be useful on any of these consoles and just jumbled them into one big pool and just put them on all the advanced consoles. And I felt like that was a really dumb idea, honestly. Okay, dumb might be a bit harsh because, yeah, it's a dilithium sink, which I know the game does kind of need, but God, this is just frustrating. And a lot of these modifiers you wouldn't want on certain ones of these consoles, like the torpedo damage. You would not want those on the isomagnetic consoles because those are the weapons power consoles. They buff your weapons power, and weapons power has no effect on torpedo damage whatsoever. So there's no point in having, mine, photon torpedo, plasma torpedo, any of the torpedo modifiers. That is pointless. And it really frustrates me that those are on there because there's no point in them. However, some of those modifiers could be useful on the tactical consoles or even the science consoles. In fact, they might even be useful on the hangar bay consoles, but on the weapon power consoles, they're of no use whatsoever. Some of these others too are just ridiculous. Like, who wants shield healing on their weapons consoles? No, I don't want that. Like, I get there's a good argument for having a wide variety of modifiers to encourage different sorts of build types, but at the same time, this is overkill. This is absolute overkill, and all it's doing is just designed to eat away at your dilithium and salvage. And again, this is good for influencing the people who are just kind of hoarding the stuff and ruining the dilithium market. But at the same time, this is going to really discourage a lot of the more casual players from engaging in the content for these consoles, because these are already a huge grind to get a hold of, and then it's going to be an even larger grind to get them to a state that you want them in. Now, with that rant over, this really leads to the question of, are these new advanced consoles worth the considerable effort in obtaining? Now, as to the science consoles, honestly, I have no idea if they're worth it or not. I have done zero research into them. I have been very focused on the engineering consoles, because there's been a lot more hype around them because they do some really interesting things, and also because I am engineering guy. I main an engineer, and I like cruisers, so yeah, I'm more interested in the engineering ones than the science ones. For this video specifically, we're only going to be looking at the Isomagnetic Plasma Distribution Manifold consoles, aka the weapon power consoles. Now, I've gathered up enough of these consoles and re-engineered enough of them for a full phaser build, which, side note, big thanks to my buddy JB over at Pirate Scum Gaming. He gave me a bunch of the components in order to craft these, made the process a lot quicker for me in order to get a full set of them. So yeah, huge shout out to Pirate Scum Gaming, and be sure to go follow them over on Twitch. Now, even with that head start thanks to JB, making these and re-engineering these and then testing these took a great deal of time. And in that time, people much smarter than me have done a much better job of analyzing how these new consoles work and how they compare to the Spire consoles. So we're just going to jump over to the Stow Builds Reddit, because the folks at stowbetter.com did a way better job at figuring this stuff out than I ever could have. I'm just going to be summarizing a lot of what's here because, frankly, it's a long post with a lot of complicated talk in it. But if you want to go check this out for yourself, I will be linking this down in the description below. It should also be popping up in the right-hand corner up above right about now. So if you want to read through this whole thing on yourself, yeah, I fully encourage you to do that. Now, most of this post compares the Isomagnetic consoles to the Spire consoles, but in this first test case, they actually compared it to a more free-to-play friendly setup, meaning that they're only using a tier 5 assault cruiser and they've only got room for 2 of the locators, and making up for that with the Lorca 2 piece, the assimilated module, reinforcements, armaments, and ordnance accelerator. They're comparing that to builds with 4 of the Isomagnetic consoles. The old tier 5 assault cruiser only has 2 tactical consoles, so they're going to be able to fit quite a bit more of the Isomagnetic consoles. And that results in quite a jump in the DPS on the beam overload build that they're running on this thing. You can see a 17% jump here on this first build, and then up to 19%, almost 20% on this one by throwing in either the Bellum consoles or the Colony consoles. That's one of the interesting things about these Isomagnetic consoles, is that you won't have access to the Spire consoles because those are the advanced tactical consoles now, so you won't be able to mix and match those together, but there are still plenty of other tactical consoles that will buff your damage. The tactical consoles from the Draenor colony are basically like locators, but more for tanking builds, because instead of the crit chance or severity, they actually get some healing abilities. But they still have that same Cat 1 buff to any of your damage types. Now, they go on to say down here that while there is a nice bump in performance from these Isomagnetic consoles from what they were running before, this was still meant to be a free-to-play build, so, and frankly, a very budget one too. We're still running a tier 5 assault cruiser, only with 2 locators. Yeah, that's something you're going to be struggling with to run in elite level TFOs, because remember, that is kind of the only way to grind for these consoles. I mean, the other option is just buy them off the exchange, but that's going to get very expensive very quickly, especially for the particular mods that you want. So someone running a strict free-to-play build like this probably wouldn't want to engage in grinding for these consoles, at least not on their own. You could easily go with, a team of well-geared players and have them kind of carry you through several of the TFOs, but again, that is going to take a while. Now, the rest of these are going to be much more high-end, starting with this one is a beam overload build on the World Razor. World Razor is actually going to be a rather interesting test case because it's actually going to have more tactical console slots than it's going to have engineering console slots. The World Razor having a 5-3-3 console layout. That's 5 tactical, 3 engineering, and 3 science. So with that, plus the universal console slot that you get from upgrading it to tier 6X, that's a maximum of 4 Isomagnetic consoles versus the 5 that they tested it against. And as you can see here, even with 1 less Isomagnetic console, they still end up outperforming the 5 vulnerability locators. Though they are also throwing in either a Bellum console or a Colony console, so it's not like you're going to gain an extra slot for another Universal console. So overall, not a huge gain there. But the fact that the isomagnetics are outperforming the locators even by a small margin with one less console, that's kind of showing, isn't it? This next one is a much more direct comparison between the two, being a complete one-to-one replacement on a fire wheel build on the Inquiry. This is a difference between 5 locators and 5 isomagnetics, and we're seeing an even bigger increase this time at 7.61. Now, what about something with much less energy seeding? So this next one is a cannon rapid fire build on the Edison Temporal Warship. That only has 2 engineering slots, 3 if you count the universal, so that is a maximum of 3 isomagnetic consoles versus 5 vulnerability locators. And even with 2 less consoles, supplemented with either a pair of the Bellum consoles or the Colony consoles, you're still looking at a small increase in damage. Very small, in fact, to the point where I would say it probably isn't even worth it at this point, because again, that's to the point where it's going to be very different depending on what sort of scenario you're in and stuff like that. But this is just going to show you just how impressive the isomagnetic consoles actually are. Now, sticking with cannons, this one is a CSV build on the Chamesh. Still similar conditions though, setting up 5 locators versus 3 isomagnetics. And still very similar results, being a very small increase to the overall damage output of the build. So those two kind of give you an idea of how these isomagnetics are going to perform on a ship that doesn't have a lot of space for engineering consoles. But again, these are engineering consoles. It would make more sense to throw them onto something like a cruiser that has a lot of space for engineering consoles. So let's look at what you get when you actually increase the number of isomagnetics compared to how many Spire consoles you have. These are the results on an Exceed Rated Limits build on the Gagarin Miracle Worker Battlecruiser, and as you can see, yeah, they gone from 5 locators to 6 isomagnetics, plus the Ordnance Accelerator or the Tachyokinetic Converter, and 6 isomags plus the Ordnance Accelerator actually performed better than the Tachyokinetic. This actually kind of surprised me, because I would have thought the crit chance and crit severity of the Tachyokinetic Converter would have overlapped the Cat 1 weapons bonus that the Ordnance Accelerator gives, but thinking about it, there's some logic there. Because this was an Exceed Rated Limits build, there's really no need to stick to either, strictly beams or cannons. You can mix and match your beams and cannons with the specialization firing mode, so they were using 4 cannons and 3 beams. Consequently, that means there's really no need for the Bellum consoles. Now, when I'm referring to the Bellum consoles, I'm referring to the Bellum Pre-Fire Chamber and, what's the beam one called? Bellum Directed Energy Manifold, that's what it is. Pre-Fire Chambers only buff cannons, just as a broad spectrum, just cannons, whereas the manifolds only buff beams. But because those damage types are such a broad spectrum of several different weapons, the buff that these consoles give is actually smaller than what you would see on something that gives something to a specific energy type damage, like something that specifically buffs phaser, like the phaser relays, or even just the Spire consoles re-engineered for phaser damage specifically. Those would do more Cat 1 damage than either of these two Bellum consoles. But even though the Colony consoles have a higher Cat 1 buff than the Bellum consoles, the Bellum consoles also come with some extra crit chance along with them. So while you're getting less Cat 1 damage out of the Bellum consoles, they're making up for it with the crit chance buff that they also get. So with an ERL build like this, using isomags, you're better off supplementing with the Colony consoles, because the Bellum consoles, you're only going to be able to buff one damage type or the other, either your cannons or your beams. You're not going to be able to do both. Well, you could do both, but I mean, they won't perform nearly as well because they're only getting half the damage that they could be. But yeah, back to the original point, the reason that the Tachyokinetic Converter didn't do as well is because there's just so little emphasis on crit chance and severity in the first place that it's just not doing enough. There's not enough to complement the crit chance and severity of the Tachyokinetic Converter to make it of as much use. So the Ordnance Accelerator's buff actually ended up being a little bit better, because there's just not enough emphasis on crit chance or crit severity for Tachyokinetic to be of any use. That's kind of always been the case with Star Trek Online. You want to do something really well, you gotta go all in for one thing and just do that one thing the very best you can. That's the best way to get as much performance out of any build that you can. Anyway, you can see here, 5 locators versus 6 isomags. Yeah, they're a noticeable increase, 12% and 10% with the Tachyokinetic. Yeah, that's a noticeable increase there. And furthermore, they go down here and actually lessen up the number of isomags, just, to see what happens. And yeah, even with 6 locators and 5 isomags and a Colony console, that's still a buff of 6%. Now, keeping with the specialization firing modes, this one is a reroute reserves to weapons build on the legendary Jem'Hadar attack ship. This is going to be another tactical focus ship, so we are dealing with more tactical slots than we are engineering slots. However, this one is showing off what you get with the extra supplemental consoles. So while this one is dealing with less isomagnetic consoles, 5 versus 4, they're adding 2 colony consoles. So they're actually losing one of their other consoles in favor of an extra colony console. And again, it still pulls ahead by 5%. 5% is a noticeable increase in damage, but it might not be that significant to you. And frankly, there might be other things you want to put on there. And again, they're not really doing anything with exploiters in here. So if your crit chance and crit severity are high enough already, you might be mixing in exploiters in there, and that could certainly change up some of this math. And yeah, a mix of exploiters and locators might be a bit more beneficial to you than going straight up to the isomags. That's mainly speaking for a tactical focus ship like this. On the cruisers, yeah, the isomags definitely seem to be reigning supreme over there on the cruisers, especially the Miracle Worker cruisers, because that's a lot of room for these consoles. Now, this Surgical Strikes build on the legendary Scimitar is actually the first case we see where the isomags actually did less. In this case, they're using exploiters instead of locators, which makes sense because this is a Surgical Strikes build. You are going to want that crit severity more than extra crit chance because it's not going to make any difference under Surgical Strikes. In this case, they're going from 5 exploiters to 4 isomagnetics and a colony console, and that results in actually 10% less DPS output. But this is the Scimitar. It's got more tactical slots than it does engineering slots. So what would this look like on a cruiser that has more engineering slots than it does tactical slots? And as you can see down here, this is on the legendary Kelvin Constitution. That's a battle cruiser, so that's going to have 5 engineering slots plus the universal, which means they're going to have room for more isomagnetics, going from 5 to 6. On this side, they had 6 isomagnetics plus the bioneural infusion circuits, which resulted in almost 11%. But again, another surprise from the Ordnance Accelerator actually did a little bit better than bioneural infusion. I definitely would have thought that the extra crit severity from bioneural would have been more beneficial to a Surgical Strikes build. But yeah, the base damage just squeaks out ahead. Because again, you're not putting as much focus on your crit severity, so there's no sense in having only a little bit of it when you can instead dump more into the massive pool of Cat 1 damage that you're already getting from all of the isomagnetics. Honestly, it is weird seeing Ordnance Accelerator pull ahead of what have for a long time been 2 DPS staples, the bioneural infusion circuits and tachyokinetic converter. Those are on a lot of my builds, and they're low buy consoles too, and they are being outshined by this reputation console, but only in thanks to these very difficult to obtain advanced consoles. Now, this one is a straight 1-to-1 comparison for Surgical Strikes, and again, you can see the isomags pulling ahead by 8%. This last one was on a Deuside build on the Eternal, and you can see here, again, a small increase. Though they do point out that a change in a Deuside build is going to be very subjective. There's a lot more variety there, and plus it's all going to depend on how much exotic damage you're also doing. That's the trick with Deuside builds. It's all a balance between your exotic damage and your energy weapon damage, though I would think these would be really helpful for Deuside builds, because the whole thing about Deusides is that you're having to split your weapons power and your auxiliary power, and these are weapons power consoles, so I would think that, you'd be able to better split the two with these consoles. That said, 3% is not as high a buff as I would have thought that would have been. But like I said, it's still kind of subjective. It's going to be depending on a lot of other factors, and that, honestly, that probably just needs more testing and a lot more wider variety of conditions. So yeah, as you can see, in most cases, the isomagnetics, when paired with Bellum consoles or Colony consoles, yeah, they're going to do better than the Spire consoles. Really, the only time the Spire consoles actually won out is when there was a noticeable difference between the number of tactical and engineering slots. Obviously, cruisers are going to benefit from these isomag consoles the most because they're going to have more engineering console slots. Particularly Miracle Worker cruisers, like there are a number that have 5 engineering slots, and then you're going to have the universal slot from it just being a Miracle Worker, and then 1 more universal slot if you upgrade it to T6X. So that's a potential for 7 isomagnetic consoles. And this is what that would look like. Obviously, with being a Miracle Worker Dreadnought with 5 engineering consoles, the Lexington Dreadnought is a prime candidate for the route of going with 7 isomagnetic consoles. There's also other options too, like there's also the Gagarin. It has a similar console layout to this, or if you want something more high-end, there's also the Inquiry. Now, with this many isomags on one build, that is increasing my weapon power up to 172, and that's just the base weapon power. Now, what happens when I use these? Because I am an engineer, power is all I can do. Bam, 201. Ooh, what happens if I add override subsystem safeties? $233. Okay, gradually dropping now, but yeah, that was at 233 for a hot second. And now it's at nothing. See, that's why I don't use override system safeties. Yes, I know engineering team fixes that, but I mean, where do I have room for that? I can't take off any of this. But yeah, that was just OSS 2, which only gives me up to plus 40%. Could have gotten that 10 higher with subsystem safeties 3. Now, obviously, this build isn't quite done yet because, yeah, I'm still using the colony consoles. I kind of burned through all my dilithium and salvage, just kind of making and re-engineering these. Again, shout out to JB for helping me out with the mats for these things. But yeah, re-engineering these things was absolutely a huge task. I think I burned through about 100k salvage. I don't even know how much dilithium just re-engineering these 7. But yeah, I didn't have enough dilithium to get the Bellum consoles, which I should show you where those come from. Those are from the Discovery reputation. You go down here to the Discovery tab, open up the store. This will open up the dilithium store for this reputation. You want to go to these tactical consoles, the energy tactical consoles. There you will find the Pax and Bellum versions of these consoles. You want the Bellum because those are the ones that give the crit chance, which is better for your DPS. The directed energy distribution manifold ones, these will give buffs to your beams. These will give buffs to your cannons. These are the pre-fire chambers. But yeah, this being a beam build, I'm going to want 2 or 3 of these manifold consoles. Fortunately, the upside to going with these is that I only have to get 1 set of these because they will work on any damage type. I just need to get a set of these and a set of these, and then I'm covered for beams and cannons. The downside here with these consoles is I've got to re-engineer these for phaser or for disruptor or plasma or whatever damage type I'm using. So I'm going to need a lot of these. And that's going to take a while. And yeah, it's the same thing for the other engineering ones. The hangar bay ones, yeah, just go for the one that is whatever damage type you're using. Which means I'm going to need a phaser set of those, and an anti-proton set of those for the lazy boat, and then another set of those in plasma for my Romulan carrier, and then another set of those in disruptor for my Klingon carrier. I'm going to be grinding these consoles forever. I'm still not even done with the isomags. I still don't have a full set of plasma or disruptor for them. And I haven't even thought about Tetrion or Polaron yet. But yeah, anyway, that's the plan. Keep these. Gonna replace these with the Bellum manifolds. Might only do 2 of the Bellum manifolds. I would like to get another universal in here because I'm a little sparse in here. Or I could just throw in the Ordnance Accelerator. That was clearly doing well with these. Okay, let's look into the Escort. Here's the Theseus, which just came out. Again, good amount of isomagnetics for this one because it's got 4 engineering consoles, then plus the 2 for Miracle Worker. But again, I'm going to want to make a couple changes here because if I've learned anything from this, clearly the Ordnance Accelerator would do better here, and then I got to swap these out for Bellums. Now, with less isomags means less of a power buff, but it's still going to be pretty substantial. Yeah, 169, nice. But yeah, still a good amount of power buff, which is going to get even higher because, again, I am an engineer. 194. Actually, while I've got this ship up, I should show you guys this because I did kind of an impromptu ISE during Mad Dog Monkey's live stream tonight, which, man, it has been forever since I last did an ISE. But, yeah, just to give you an idea of what this ship did, yeah, last minute ISE on this build right here, nearly 700k. So yeah, just to give you an idea of just how well these Isomag consoles are doing, nearly 700k in just a last-minute ISE run. And honestly, if I had the Bellum consoles and the Ordnance Accelerator instead of the bioneural infusion circuits, that probably would have crossed 700. Now, of course, I don't want you guys to think this was all just the isomagnetic consoles. I'm running a lot of high-end traits on this build, and I'm also running the Maelstrom torpedoes on this thing. Yeah, you can see those did like 60k just on their own under Torp Spread 1, because, God, those things are absolutely insane for weapons. And then Recursive Shearing doing another 28, because this has also got a Temporal Seed on it. But yeah, still a large bulk of the damage coming from my energy weapons, which makes sense. It's a Scatter Volley build. But yeah, that just shows how much power is getting to these through those isomagnetics. Okay, just because I know people ask, there's the traits. I'm not going to go over them because this isn't a build video. I'll link Vidra down below too, so you can use the visual glossary to figure out what's what. But again, if you've seen my build videos before, you probably know what a lot of this is already. Yeah, traits-wise, this is pretty much a standard scatter volley build for me. But yeah, the big difference here is the gear I'm using. Oh, I also threw on this just for the sake of screwing around with it. This is the Tholian Warp Core out of that new Tetrion set from the event a while ago. I was just messing around with this to test out those, what do you call it, those Tholian Warp Crystals, and I actually got like 15k out of those in the ISE run, so that's not bad for a Warp Core. Like, so yeah, those are the new Advanced Engineering Isomagnetic consoles. If you've been wondering, are these worth grinding for? I hope this answers that question for you. Yeah, they're going to be a lot of work to get, but at the same time, there are noticeable performance increases across most build types with these. I said most build types, most energy weapon build types. They're not going to be of any use on like an EPG or torp boat. But yeah, if you like energy weapon builds, particularly ones on cruisers, these are probably going to be something you're going to want to start striving for. So yeah, what do you think of these new Isomagnetic consoles? Or just the advanced consoles in general? Are they something you're interested in? Or are you just gonna yell at me about how you don't care about the meta? Because I love hearing about that every time I do one of these videos. But yeah, while you're down there, be sure to hit like and subscribe and hit that bell for notifications. If you'd like to further support the channel, you can hit the join button to become a member, or you can hit the super thanks button, or hit the link to the merch store that's in the video's description. If you're ever shopping on the Epic Games Store, be sure to use my content creator code STU1701. Either way, my name's Stu. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys next time.